When you bought a Zeiss Ikon camera, you weren't just buying the camera, you were buying into a system. Today, that generally means you're buying into a digital camera with a bunch of lenses. That's what they mean by the system. Back in the 1950s, well, actually starting in the 1920s and moving on up through the end of Zeiss Ikon, the system really meant an entire line of accessories. So it was the camera, it was the camera body, it was the lens, of course, not for fixed lenses, but interchangeable lenses. But it was also other things, other accessories, including filters, close-up lenses, and many, many, many other items. So in this video, let's just take a look at a couple of them. Some of these are very simple, some of these are more complicated, but they're certainly worth looking at. These all relate to the Contaflex, the Zeiss Ikon Contaflex, that was the topic of another video. So let's clear things away and start with the filters. Depending on the camera, the filter's either screwed on traditionally or screwed onto the outside of the lens. In this case, so let's first take a look at the filters, at the color filters. This actually is a Proxar lens, so that's close-up lens. And so this was a yellow filter. Zeiss Ikon made these in the most popular forms for black and white film, and that would be yellow, green, and red. So a yellow filter is used to darken the sky. A red filter will darken the sky even more and provide even greater contrast. A green filter often is going to be used when you're shooting foliage. If you shoot something with a plant in it that is chlorophyll, if you remember your science class, that plant is going to come out very dark, almost a black. So you would use a green filter to lighten the foliage. Now, for the Contaflex, these just screwed in traditionally. This is a 27 millimeter internal filter thread. However, there is something else that you want to keep in mind. So now if I wanted to shoot this, I would just have to figure out what the exposure compensation would be for the filter. And it's usually going to be between 1 and 2 stops, depending on the color of the filter. This one doesn't happen to mention what the compensation is. You probably would want to look that up in a book. This one appears to be a medium yellow filter. There were pale yellow filters. I don't know if Zeiss Ikon produced a pale yellow filter. It's very possible that they just did your basic yellow, green, and red, as I had mentioned before. One of the nice things about Zeiss Ikon cameras is that you could often use a lot of these accessories with more than one camera. That's something that could be very aggravating depending on what camera maker you use. The Japanese camera makers tend to just buy whatever filter you need. And so you would sometimes have to buy, for example, a polarizing filter in 2 or 3 different filter sizes just to have that option to be able to use it. Now, with the Contina 2, for example, you'll notice that there's no inner filter thread on the lens. And that also is going to be true for the Ikonta cameras. This one is equipped with a Tessar lens, and this one is equipped with a Novar lens. Once again, there's no inner filter ring. So how did you use the filter? Well, there was actually threads on the outside of the lens barrel. So you'll see this little gap here between this part of the lens and your focusing ring. Same here. So in this case, the filter actually threads to the outside of the lens. Moving back to the Contaflex, I've already discussed how this is a fixed lens. That is, it's not interchangeable, and so your options are pretty much down to one lens, which is the 45 millimeter Tessar. With a close focus distance of roughly 3 feet, that doesn't really give you a lot of ability to to do some close-up photography. And that's one of the nice things about SLRs, is being able to move in closer to the subject. So what were you to do? Well, the answer is use one of these, which is a Proxar. Most Zeiss Ikon filters came in these nice little cases. The pre-war options came in a small Bakelite case. These came in a clear plastic case. So, Proxar was the brand name for a close-up lens, and you're going to notice that this one, that these are actually branded Carl Zeiss. Just simply pushed onto the front of the lens, and that's it. This was for 1 meter, but it allowed you to get much closer than 1 meter. I want to say cut the close focus distance to about 18 inches. Let me check that real quick. If you have 2 or more of these, you should be able to just push them together and then attach it to the front of the lens. Now you have something that looks, well, it looks like this. Doesn't look something like this. It looks exactly like this. You might think that if one of these can get you down to 18 inches, then 2 of them should be able to get you down to about 9 inches. In fact, that's not true. With 2 of these attached, your close focus distance now is about 14 inches, but that's still going to be quite a bit more than 3 feet. And so go ahead and give that a try. Because these are clear, you shouldn't run into any magnification issues. However, because of the length of these, you could run into vignetting. So I probably wouldn't advise using 2. I probably would just stick to 1. Those accessories are fairly cheap. I think at one point I bought maybe 10 to 15 of them for about $5 each. Now, I'm not sure what they cost, but they probably cost more than $12 to $15. They're probably not super expensive. So as I mentioned, this camera has a fixed lens, and so your choices are limited to 45 millimeters, and that's about it. Or is that true? One of the more interesting accessories that Zeiss Ikon produced for this was this little device here, this bracket. This bracket just simply slides on, and you'll notice that there are grooves right here on that side and right here on this side. So this little accessory just simply slides onto the camera from the bottom. And you hear that lock into place. To remove it, you have these little tabs or ears. Simply squeeze them together and it'll slide off. When you push it on from the bottom, you'll hear it click into place. Okay, so that's nice. So what are we going to do with this? Well, in addition to adding weight to the camera, it also provided a mount for this item. This item is the Zeiss Ikon telescope, or telescope. Not entirely sure how to pronounce that, but telescope, and it's 1.7x, which means it gave you a 1.7x magnification factor on the 45 millimeter lens. Notice that this is branded Zeiss Ikon, not branded Carl Zeiss. So this would have been made by a third-party manufacturer, possibly Steinheil, maybe Rodenstock. It wasn't specified, although it does carry a serial number. With a magnification factor of 1.7, it gave you an effective focal length of 76.5 millimeters or 77 millimeters, meaning that you got a nice portrait lens out of it. The book, the Zeiss Compendium, mentions that a wide-angle lens was designed but never put into production. The book also says that the image quality from this was poor. However, I have used this, and I have to disagree. I thought the image quality was pretty decent. I think I kept my aperture probably at f8 or smaller, probably between f8 and f16, and really, I didn't have a problem with the image. One thing that's always been a bit confusing to me is the fact that now you have 2 focusing rings. You have your first focusing ring, and then you have your second one. I'm going to guess that the intention was for you to set your tessar at infinity, and then you use this to focus the lens. Note that your close focus distance now drops to just under 4 feet. But With it being roughly 77 millimeters or very close to 80 millimeters, now you're really looking at a portrait lens. Notice that this one is marked in feet and with meters on the underside. By loosening the screws here, there's 3 little grub screws. You could then take this ring and rotate it so that the meter markings was the dominant, was the default scale. In this case, though, I'll probably stick with feet. That's how the lens is marked, and that's actually what I'm most comfortable with. This had its own filter ring. So I believe this to be a 55 millimeter exterior thread filter ring. So once again, it would screw on, it would attach itself to the outside of this lens. So what else could this bracket be used for? Well, let's remove this lens. I mentioned this in the video about the Contaflex, and here it is. This is the Staar. This is a small little device which attaches to that bracket and allows you to take stereo photos. There were several parts to this. There was this item. There was actually 2. There's the instruction booklet inside. It had its own special covering. And you'll notice that once again, it has the Zeiss Ikon brand and 2 small holes here. It has its own rear lens cap. There really aren't any lenses to speak of. It's really just 2 large prisms. And then this would just thread onto the front. When it was in place, you could hear it lock. There we go. That would be positioned correctly. And then you would take this item. This was known as the septum. And you'll notice it has 2 little posts right here. So you would insert it into these 2 holes. And so when you took your photo, it prevented anything on the left side from interfering with what was taken on the right, and anything on the right side interfering with things that you were taking on the left. When you take stereo photos, you really should stop down the lens as far as possible, as far as reasonably possible. So I would shoot what you could at f11 and f16. You would then focus normally using this open area up top, and just make sure your horizon is horizontal. That is, you don't want to take photos in which the camera is slightly tilted. I have taken stereo photos before. I haven't used this device. So with this device, it takes that image, refracts it down into a single frame. So each image, if you think about it, is a half frame. So the 2 half frames would then be combined to form a single stereo image. Well, the 2 half frame images would be recorded separately, and then you would use a stereo viewer that would then turn them into a single 3-dimensional image. So that's what this device was for. This one happened to come with its instruction manual, and that's always good. So to remove it, there's this little tab underneath. Simply press that, twist to the left. You'll probably want to hold it upright so when it comes off, it doesn't fall. Like that. And this is something you wouldn't want to drop. So you'll want to keep its prism cover on. Uses 2 prisms in here, 2 hefty prisms. So what's the cost of all this? It's probably going to be in the weight. So once again, let's check this out real quickly. So the camera by itself is 1 pound, 8 ounces. I suppose you could leave this bracket on the camera at all times. It adds rough almost 2 ounces to it, so now you're up to 1 pound, 10 ounces. And how about if you want to use this little telescope image or accessory lens? Now you're up to 2 pounds. Now what about the stereo adapter? Stereo adapter, Just going to spin this once or twice, keep it from falling. With its septum is now 2 pounds 6 ounces. So that is the price you pay for its various accessories. By itself, without its lens caps, but with its septum, this weighs 12 ounces. So it weighs, let's see, 3/4 of a pound. And the telescope lens weighs almost 6.5 ounces. Not quite. So you pile everything into your bag, pile the camera, your little stereo image maker, the septum, Proxar, and the little yellow filter, and all of a sudden you're pushing 3 pounds. Still not a huge amount of weight, but it is something for you to keep in mind. After you took your stereo photos and got your film back, so remember you got 2 shots per frame, but still essentially it's 1 shot per frame. Obviously you'll want to use transparency film. You'll either get back 24 or 36 slides. And this is a slide viewer. There's many that were available. This is the official Zeiss Ikon slide viewer. What's it called? Stereo something. I think that translates to stereo viewer. Very simple. I can't recall if this is not battery operated, so you can just point this toward a window or light source and it would display here. Or if you happen to have one of these new LED panel lights, you could always use that. Simply press your slide down and look through these two eyepieces here. This is made of plastic. Feels more like Bakelite than plastic. I think this comes apart. I have taken it apart just to clean it. And it's a fairly handy device. There are certainly others that made stereo viewers, and I would say any of them is going to be adequate. If you're a Zeiss Ikon collector, of course, this one's a bit nicer simply because of the fact that it's branded Zeiss Ikon. There you are. Might be a little bit difficult to see, but it is. I don't think it's made of Bakelite, or maybe it is made of Bakelite. In any case, I have tried to sort of keep this intact. Because you are shooting stereo photographs, and so you're only shooting half a frame. Remember, your default orientation is going to be like a half frame photo, in that your default orientation is going to be vertical. So essentially, you're shooting vertical half frames in 3D. Now, I have to confess something. I thought that I had one of the interchangeable backs handy, but I couldn't find it. What I found was one for the Contaflex. Briefly, all of these interchangeable backs work the same. As I mentioned, this one's for the Contaflex, and so you can see that it's much too wide for the Contaflex. But they all work the same. They replace the back that you have here. And you would take out the film spool. So you would preload your film into this, and then you would simply slide this into its place. You would lock it in with the keys, and then you would be good to go. When I mentioned that you had to preload the film, I'm not kidding. You had to get in here and open each of these. Oh, I know what it is. You had to have the dark slide in place before you could unlock this. That's what it was. Now you should be able to unlock each of these. But briefly, you would preload each of these, run the film across, then begin. So here's your fresh spool film over here. Here's your takeoff spool, and you would start the film. Then you would insert your dark slide, put this onto the back of the camera, close the back. Once the back was closed, you would remove the dark slide, and then you would slip it in here into its holder. As you can see, the procedure is slightly complicated, so I think a lot of people just didn't even bother with this. They just changed film as they needed. I would say that if you were a professional shooter and you needed to be able to switch films very quickly, you would buy several of these backs, perhaps 5 or 6 of them, preload them all ahead of time, and then when you were out on your shoot, you could then just you could quickly switch backs. So at the end of the roll, you would then take this, insert your dark slide again, then you could unlock the back, remove it from the camera, put the new back in, relock this, and you're done, and you're good. I have used this back on the Contour X before. They're an acquired taste. I found it just as easy to simply use a standard 35mm cassette and load the film and unload the film when I needed. I wasn't in that great of a hurry. And there you have it. Those are the accessories available for the Zeiss Ikon Contaflex 35mm SLR. They're all very usable today and give you a bit more flexibility than just having a 35mm camera with a fixed lens. And that brings us to the end of this video. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. And if you have a comment, feel free to leave one below or send me an email at contact@camera-talk.net. And I'll see you on the next video.